Good morning. Welcome to this webinar on financial planning for expats in Spain. My name is Liz Rowlinson, a property journalist, and I'm here with two experts from Chase Buchanan Private Wealth Management. First up, Nicole Sandler in Valencia and Steve Langford in Nerja. First up, could I get you two to tell us a bit more about yourselves, starting with Nicole?
Hi, Liz. Thanks for the introduction. Sure. So I'm Nicole Sandler. I'm a private wealth manager with Chase Buchanan based in Valencia. I moved to Spain back in 2014 and I was living in quite a small town just down the road from here called Javier, which is on the northern Costa Blanca for almost 11 years. And then very recently this summer, I've moved here to Valencia. And before Spain, I lived in the UK for 8 years, working for quite a large wealth management company there. And the reason I moved to Spain was also to continue my life professionally in wealth management. So, although I'm Australian, I'm very much a cross-border specialist between Spain and the UK.
Fabulous. Thank you. Steve?
Yeah, well, hi, Liz, and thanks for the introduction again. Well, I'm a little bit older than Nicole, so I've been in the industry for 35 years, cutting my teeth originally back in the 1980s, working for two banks, and then became an independent financial advisor in 97. Moved to Spain in 2011 with an opportunity of working doing the same role in Spain. So I've been here almost 15 years now and inadvertently become a specialist on this cross-border financial planning, which is great. And one of the most enjoyable things is helping clients and people who then become friends in the whole onboarding process, and then just seeing their lives change and to be involved in that is fantastic. So it's a very fruitful role.
Brilliant. Can you just tell me a little bit more about that role, what it involves?
Yeah, I mean, well, like I said, the process starts early. I mean, we spoke to somebody earlier who was only just come on board. We've been talking for the best part of a year, more, in fact, probably going on for 2 years, and getting this whole financial plan because there are major differences. I wouldn't say disadvantages, but I'd say differences between the two countries. So it's important to start that role, that road early and make sure that, look, it's a bit like taking a budget airline flight where you're going to pay more for a bag, you're going to pay more for a seat, you're going to pay more if you want to go through security fast, but you need to know. And if you know the implications, then you can plan accordingly.
Great. And Nicole, is your role similar to Steve's?
It really is. And I like to think of it as I understand where somebody currently is with their life and their financial planning, and then understand where they would like to be. And then I help create a very clear strategy to get them from where they are now to where they'd like to be and bridge that gap.
Perfect. Well, we're going to talk about how the steps of leaving the UK, moving to Spain, considering different investment concerns. So first up, if someone's considering leaving the UK, we've talked about the fact that timing is very important. Is there an ideal time to sell up your UK property from a financial/tax perspective? Steve?
Yeah. Yeah, I can jump in here. Look, it's like I was saying originally that some of the things need some planning. So, for example, things are just different. Property, as the major one, as a British national, our principal private residence is free of tax when we sell it. In Spain, it's not. Under 65, you pay capital gains tax on the profit. So that's one of the most important things. Actually, is look at what the effect would be on certain things like selling the property. Now, the tax residency in Spain goes from January through to December. So, they don't offer a split year treatment in Spain. It sounds a little complex. Again, bespoke advice is really appropriate. So there isn't a split year treatment. So if one was to move in, say, May, and they've sold the house in March, they could potentially be tax resident since January the 1st. So therefore, liable as a Spanish resident, you're liable for tax on your worldwide income and worldwide gains. So the timing of the move is really important. When you sell a property, well, of course, predominantly we're talking about a UK market, which can be a little bit volatile. Certainly, I believe at the moment it's a little bit depressed. Whether it increases, some people can sit on a property for 6 months and it might delay their move. So it is quite important to just get the timeline right.
Indeed. Could I consider keeping my property and renting it out? Maybe, I don't know whether Nicole, you'd like to answer that?
In short, yes, you can do whatever you like. So you can keep the UK property and rent it out. It would be reportable in Spain on the overseas asset declaration, first of all. So you need to tell Spain that you have this property. So it's something on the Modelo 720 is the name of this declaration. It's also subject to income tax in Spain, even if it's vacant. There's a deemed amount of income tax due in Spain. So although mechanically, yes, you can do whatever you like because your life choices needs to be in the driver's seat more so than tax. But from a tax perspective, it's not always that tax efficient to live in Spain and to hold UK property. You report it here, as I say, it's subject to income tax. If you then sell it as a Spanish resident, it's subject to capital gains tax on the full gain since you purchased it. And it's a UK asset, which means it's going to attract UK inheritance tax. And depending on who the beneficiary is, it could also be subject to Spanish succession tax, which is inheritance tax here in Spain. So as long as you're aware of all of that and have no surprises, then you can keep it. Also, just to comment on something actually that Steve said, I think it was a really great response because I think this is one of the areas where I see the most amount of mistakes when people don't reach out for advice in advance, don't understand the different tax years and timings and residency, and they'll sell a UK property thinking they're UK resident, but then they spend more time in Spain, which actually makes them a Spanish resident. And then the next year they have a surprise capital gains tax liability in Spain. And it's a really terrible start to your new life in Spain. And it can be completely avoidable if you plan correctly.
Okay. And what about currency as well? That's a consideration. Steve?
Yeah, it can be a consideration. I mean, we've seen since the 15, well, I've been here 15 years, and I've seen exchange rates go from 140 down to 108. So yeah, the exchange rates, like you can't really guess what the market's going to do. I do have a very Northern England phrase, which is don't let the tax tail and the currency tail wag your dog. You get on with your life and you make it work. It's a difficult consideration, choose the right currency company. We can give guidance on that kind of thing. I mean, what we do effectively do is act as a conduit to other specialisms within this role, within this whole. So it's kind of concierge what we do. So we're not currency specialists, but we do have contacts that can help through that process.
Sure. And you've preempted my next question, which is about visas. At what stage should I apply for? There's a lot to think about, but if I need to apply for a Spanish visa, where does that come into the process?
Yeah. Oh, sorry, I jumped in here. So visas, it's so important, I mean, essentially it's your ticket to the show and you can focus on tax and financial planning. That's obviously important too, but without the visa, the whole process doesn't start. So I always recommend to reach out and to speak to a visa specialist very early on because there are several types of visas depending on what your individual circumstance is. So for example, a lot of individuals that we speak to are coming to Spain to retire. So that visa is something called the non-lucrative visa. You cannot work on that visa and it's very strict in that aspect as well. So you come to Spain and you don't work or you're retired and it's all about proving to Spain that you're self-sufficient. So for example, you have private medical cover and you have ample savings or income to meet your requirements for life here in Spain. And there was another visa which has actually been taken away recently, something called the golden visa. So the offering has slightly narrowed in recent times. But then if you are moving to Spain and you're working, there's something called a digital nomad visa. So you're coming to Spain, for example, and you haven't been living here in recent years and you're working for a Spanish employer. So there are very strict requirements to meet, which is why it's so important to reach out in advance, maybe 12, 18 months even in advance, speak to a visa specialist and see what the requirements are to firstly make sure, because otherwise you can dream and visualize this entire life, but if you don't meet the visa requirements, it can't happen. So it's really important at the very, very outset beginning.
Okay, thank you. Well, let's talk about with other finances. Why can't I sort of use my UK, my existing financial advisor in the UK to get advice about pension investments, Nicole?
Sure, this is a really good point, and it's something that stems back from Brexit. So several years ago now, but it's actually quite surprising, I think, the amount of people that still don't understand the complexities here. So if you were in the UK with UK pensions and investments with a UK advisor, you cannot continue to receive financial advice once you leave the UK. Essentially, they need to leave you at the border unless they have special European permissions to do so, which almost nobody does. So it was a regulation change stemming back to Brexit. And what that means is if you then move to Spain and you have UK investments and pensions, you can't receive any financial advice on it anymore from Spain. You need to receive financial advice from a regulated entity in Europe in the same jurisdiction that you live in. So it is really important. And again, it sounds repetitive, but it goes back to reaching out far in advance and having that cross-border planning far in advance before you arrive in Spain, so that if necessary, you can restructure your income, your pensions, your investments before you move to Spain.
Okay.
Yeah, I think I'd add on to that, if I may. It is that the industry itself, as I've seen over the many years, it adapts. And now UK advisors, I mean, nobody has the permissions because the Financial Conduct Authority in the UK do not issue those permissions anymore. I mean, the system prior to that was possibly a little flawed anyway, because how would you expect a UK advisor, and why would they, understand the 17 autonomous regions in Spain and the 2 autonomous cities? There are tax implications with each of those regions, so it's really important to have somebody on the ground. So the system originally was a little flawed. However, now what we're finding is we have kind of handover meetings with advisors from the UK. Generally speaking, like we have relationships, UK financial advisors have the same relationship with their clients. They know them for years and years, and they get on and they become friends. And it's a shame from their point of view that that relationship has to cease. But I think what's important is to make the UK independent financial advisor understand where we stand, how we work, and make sure that that client is going to be looked after going forward. So it's a forever moving regulatory framework, and yeah, we work together now with UK financial advisors.
Great. And Steve, can I follow up with how can I check that Chase Buchanan is authorized to give advice? Any of your advisors?
Yeah, I mean, look, the regulatory process has changed. If you go back to prior to Brexit, the UK FCA offered these passporting licenses. There are 2 main jurisdictions for regulation who work very alongside and almost mirror the regulatory processes from the FCA. We use CISEC, which is in Cyprus, so we're registered in Cyprus, and those details are available on the CISEC register.
Great. You mentioned Cyprus because obviously you deal with other countries apart from Spain.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. We have offices in many parts of the world. So Portugal, France, obviously Spain, yeah, Cyprus, obviously Canada and the US, France, and obviously with our roots in the UK.
Great. Well, we're going to actually hear from one of your clients. Paul and Vari, hello.
Hi, good morning.
Hi, good morning.
Tell me briefly, where are you in Spain? When did you arrive?
We're in Nerja, which is just a
Lovely.
little bit east of Malaga.
Great.
We first of all bought an apartment here 20 years ago, but we finally moved and fully retired here in the end of 2018-19.
Congratulations. So, you used Chase Buchanan. What does ongoing financial planning with them look like now that you're living in Spain?
It's very comforting to know that our future is pretty well looked after. We had to make some changes, and Steve helped us through that process. So we're now looking at a more stable ongoing future.
Brilliant. So it would be correct to say you feel much more confident about your long-term financial plans now.
Most definitely, because our situation is changing with various pensions and things. Steve and all the guys at Chase Buchanan were very, very helpful to me and very tenacious with an pension investment of mine that had gone extremely wrong. And it's now very much back on track. So we're very confident that as time goes on and as our needs change, then Chase Buchanan are there for us.
Brilliant. Looking back, what was the most challenging aspect of relocating to Spain, and how Chase Buchanan were able to support you in that?
Well, we had already had the property for the best part of 16 years. So we were expecting certain challenges. Went quite smoothly, but as we have encountered financially, it's a lot more stable now. We're very happy and very comfortable.
I think it was timing as well for us,
Yeah.
when to move things, and Steve was really good with advice about that.
Yeah, timing is so key with financial planning, isn't it?
Mm.
And would that be your one piece of advice that anyone thinking of moving to Spain like you, that you would share?
Yeah, we think that doing research is very important for all aspects, because life in Spain and the sort of bureaucracy and some of the challenges you face are very different to what you might have experienced previously. So get as much information as possible, and then things don't come as a surprise.
And the other important thing for us with Steve and Chase Buchanan was being able to actually meet someone face to face. We're a little bit older and we still quite like that. And it also helps, I think, engender trust, and allows you to have a good ongoing relationship with your financial guy.
Definitely. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I've got another question now. What sets Chase Buchanan apart from other advice firms? Nicole?
That's a really good question. I would say one of the first points for me is independence. And if I'm really honest, it's actually one of the reasons when I joined Chase Buchanan some years ago now, it's something I was looking for as a financial advisor, was working for an entity that was truly independent, because it's actually a really important word. And what that means is we don't have in-house funds or investment providers that we work with, or in-house trustees, for example. So that means that everything that we recommend to our clients is truly in their best interests. So independence is really important. And I think it's definitely something that sets Chase Buchanan apart. Transparency, also very important. It means that clients have peace of mind, that everything they invest in is completely transparent. They can see that we're regulated. They can see what the fees are, for example. We provide information as to every aspect of what their fees even pay to. We have a page, for example, in our corporate brochure, which depicts that in a graph to show exactly what happens. So transparency, I think it's a word that's used a lot, but it's something that's very, very important in this particular industry.
Great.
Yeah, I could just add to that, actually, if I may, is that we do have my apologies. We do have an accreditation from the Chartered Insurance Institute in Europe. We were the first, and in fact, I think we are the only financial advisor that have this accreditation from the Chartered Insurance Institute. Also, we work in partnership with the Metropolitan Police, so we produce a booklet of scams. So that's available on their website and also on our website. It's just scams that one needs to be aware of when getting involved in financial advice, full stop, really, but particularly when moving overseas.
That's very reassuring. Great. We've heard briefly from one client, but Nicole, what can I expect as a client of Chase Buchanan?
So what's to be expected, for example, from a servicing and communications point of view? This is something I personally feel really strongly about, is communication, but also consistency with communication, because we need to be there with our clients through the good times and the challenging times, not just the good times. So clients have trusted us to give up their life savings essentially to us to manage. So this is why it's so important. For example, we would send weekly market updates. That's a short synopsis explaining what's happened in the markets that past week or what might be speculated to happen. And what that means is clients always have a background, a story, and context to put next to their own portfolio's performance. So then in addition to that, we will have regular meetings with clients. And it's not just on an annual basis, which you tend to see a lot in this industry. So personally, I let clients drive that decision. How frequently do you need me to contact you? Maybe it's quarterly, maybe it's monthly, maybe it's biannually or annual reviews. It really depends. And then there's quarterly valuations with in-depth market commentary. So again, they can understand, okay, my performance is like this, and the reason is like that. So communication is very, very important. We also will encourage clients to have face-to-face meetings or video meetings or telephone meetings, just completely on what their preference might be.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think it's also important to look at any potential tax implications and changes within the framework of where they're living as well on a regular basis. Hence why we meet at least annually with clients. But if there are any specific updates that people need to know about, then we communicate that straight away, which is important. And then it's informed decisions, isn't it?
I think
and so much is constantly changing in Spain as we're trying to keep reporting on Place in the Sun.
Yeah.
Just to add on to that, sorry, it was a really good point, Steve, that you've just made, because when we meet with clients, okay, the reason they've reached out is because it's a pension or because of an investment, but that's not the entirety of the meeting. Of course, it's an important part of it, but it's also life, the universe, and everything here in Spain, or what's relevant to them back in the UK if something could be topical. So it's not just concentrating on the investment and the performance and the markets. It's talking about their personal situation, what may have changed in the specific region of Spain that they live in, what the tax implications could be, what the regulation or legal changes have been. And like we've said a few times so far, the goalposts here move quite quickly all the time. So you really need to keep your finger on the pulse and live and breathe the same financial and regulation environment that our clients do. So that makes a huge part of the client review meetings as well.
Okay. Moving forward, Steve, how can I ensure that my pensions investments are working as hard while taking advantage of the different way that tax is reported in Spain?
Look, there are lots of things to consider. First of all, the tax implications, as we alluded to earlier, and the autonomous regional differences and the residential status as well. But things that need to be looked at earlier, things like banking status. So some of the banks now, since Brexit, will request you close your account if you're living in Europe. But there's lots of things to consider, like the estate planning differences. So. Inheritance tax in the UK, for example, as we know, is an estate. So it's from my estate if I pass. It's my estate that pays any potential inheritance tax. Whereas in Spain, it's upside down from this. So it's a recipient's tax, and it's taxable on assets that are in Spain, and also if resident beneficiaries are in Spain. But what they also do is they categorize the distance between the donor and the donee in the relationship. And the further apart that relationship is, the higher the tax. So all these things need taken into consideration. And of course, that's important to start early, because pensions, for example, as we understand from a UK perspective, 25% of their lump sum, if it's a pension scheme, a personal pension scheme, is free of tax. If you draw that while you're in Spain, that's fully taxable on scaled rates in Spain. So it's important, again, to start early, make sure everything's in the correct order before moving.
Brilliant. How easy is it to move investments from the UK to Spain, Steve?
Yeah, well, first of all, you don't have to move UK investments to Spain. We work with different jurisdictions that have agreements with Spain, which are more tax efficient. If you look at, for example, ISAs are a fantastic investment in the UK. They're completely free of tax, and you can hold them for years and years, and you can build up a fund quite significant. However, those are, if you look at the small print on those, it says for UK residents only. So you can't contribute any further contributions into an ISA. For example, I'm only using an ISA as an example. You can't make any further contributions. Then you can retain them, but you pay tax on the profit. Now, if you then go 3 or 4 years down the line and you then decide to restructure your investments, then the tax implications in Spain are from inception, not from the date of your residency. So you've purchased ISAs, say, in year 2000, you've accumulated quite a substantial amount of money, and then you decide to surrender them, you could potentially be liable for capital gains tax since the year 2000 when you bought it. So again, you know, there are various reporting forms in Spain about overseas assets, and it's just getting everything in the correct order is important. It's workable though.
And Nicole, currency is another thing to consider with that, isn't it?
Absolutely. Currency is always there when you've got this cross-border move from the UK to Spain, or whichever country into Spain. It's really important to take into consideration. And we can recommend currency transfer specialists, and we talk through strategy and timings. The currency of the investment is really important as well, and the underlying fund. So the currency is something that makes a huge part of the overall investment solution. But I completely agree with what Steve's just explained. You know, what makes good tax sense for life in the UK usually doesn't make good tax sense for life here in Spain. And yes, you can keep it, but from a tax perspective, if your plan is to stay in Spain for as far as you know, or at least the medium to long term, it makes sense to review that in advance. And there's better options for Spanish residents from an investment point of view. There's options where they're in a format that Spain know, like, understand, and approve of. So it's going to be working harder for you from a tax and an investment perspective.
I think just on the currency thing, just to add to that, sorry, my apologies, to add to on the currency thing, you know, if you're going to be living in somewhere like Spain, then do you denominate your investment structure going forward to reduce the currency risk going forward? If you continue to denominate your investments in sterling, then every time you take an income payment or you make a withdrawal, that's got to be changed over into euros. So you can inadvertently increase your currency risk by denominating in the wrong currency. So that's a consideration that we do have going forward.
Indeed. So you've alluded to this already briefly, but how will my approach to financial planning need to change once I'm living in Spain? If Steve, you could start off on that.
Yeah, well, yeah, as we've said, we've alluded to it quite a bit. So, you know, some people might think their taxation is higher in Spain. It isn't necessarily if you're aware what the implications are. In some regions, so I mentioned earlier, there are 17 autonomous regions and 2 autonomous cities, and the tax implications are different. Now, there are 2 types of taxes. One is general income tax, which is your pension income or your working income. And then there's the second one. Well, no, sorry, the general income taxes are taxed regionally specific. So if you live in Andalusia, you live in Valenciana, you live in Catalonia, all of those implications can be different. The other type of income tax is capital gains tax, savings income tax, and those are nationally taxed. So there is also a thing called wealth tax, and those are regionally specific as well. So some regions don't have it. Some regions do. So that's important. It's important that people stay compliant for the reporting. So there are certain jurisdictions that the Spanish will class as a fiscal paradiso, you know, tax haven, and they don't like them. It's understandable. So you've got to report on them, and the tax implications can be higher as well. So it's important to make sure that you're compliant with Spain. And then look at the estate planning is also important. As I said earlier, the inheritance tax is completely different. And then you've got to kind of just make sure that everything is in the right position before you move.
Brilliant. A fiscal paradiso. That's a new one. I like that. Nicole, did you want to add anything?
I was thinking about it. Yes, you read my mind. The key takeaway, I think, from everything that Steve said, because you can see there's so much to it, you know, it can seem quite overwhelming, but it doesn't need to be. And I think this just emphasizes the need to reach out for advice, because it will save you a ton of time, energy, and effort, and you'll get the right advice for you. Because looking online is a really good starting point, whether you're looking at social media forums, Google, ChatGPT, whatever it might be. But you need to keep in mind that, as Steve has said, there's 17 different autonomous regions, all working wildly differently from a tax perspective. So when you put something into ChatGPT, more often than not, from a technical point of view, it's actually wrong. for Spain because it will be talking about Catalonia and you're moving down to Malaga, for example. Or the information could be quite out of date, which I see all the time as well. So you might be going down a specific road that actually isn't correct at all for you. So it really does depend on your individual circumstances and the individual region that you're moving to. So if you do reach out for advice, it will cut through all that white noise and just help navigate very clearly what you as an individual need to be aware of and what you don't need to be aware of.
Sure. Okay, let's whiz through and talk about I know Steve's already referred to income tax, but are there any what tax rules should people know about, Nicole?
So yeah, it's a good question because I always feel that Spain has this reputation of being quite tax heavy, and it can be if you just move here with assets and investments from abroad, it can be tax heavy, but it doesn't need to be. So the various different types of taxes, you've got income tax, which Steve has just explained. So within income tax, there's two different camps of the general rates and the savings rates. There's something called wealth tax, which doesn't exist in the UK, which is where you need to declare your worldwide assets at the end of each year. However, there's some really great allowances, and some regions don't even have wealth tax. There's an exemption, such as Andalusia or Madrid, or some regions have such high allowances it affects almost nobody. So on paper, it can look quite daunting, but the reality can be actually quite favorable. So there's wealth taxes, income taxes, capital gains tax, which falls into the income tax camp. We've talked about succession tax, which is basically inheritance tax here, works in the complete opposite way than it does in the UK. But with each one of these taxes, there's allowances and reductions depending on the individual circumstances. There's also a personal allowance, for example. It doesn't work in the same way as the UK, but there is a personal allowance for income tax.
Great. And I think the only thing you haven't touched on there is, Steve, double tax treaties.
Yeah, I mean, there is a double tax treaty between the UK and Spain. So if it's a cited asset, i.e. a property, and it's cited in the UK, for example, then UK HMRC have first shout. Okay. But under the double, but as a resident of Spain, if you live in Spain for more than 183 days from January through to December, then you're liable for tax on your worldwide income and gains. So effectively what happens is UK take their slice of tax, and then you also declare in Spain, and it's discounted from what you've already paid under the double tax treaty arrangement. So I mean, Spain do have double tax treaty arrangements with many countries. UK certainly is one of those, and it's the same with certain types of income. Kind of civil servants' income is always going to be taxed in the UK under civil service rules. And it's not taxed in Spain. However, Spain take into account. So there is quite an agreement. It was amended back in 2015 very slightly, but essentially it's still there. So you won't pay tax twice, but you pay the greater of course.
Thank you. And I know that Nicole's already alluded to some of this, but Steve, are there any tax breaks or incentives that people can take advantage of in Spain that not already mentioned?
Yeah, it's pretty. I mean, look, in terms of investments, there are some super investments, and the tax treatment of those are really good. So you can have your investment and you can denominate in whichever currency, but essentially there is no tax whilst it stays within the tax wrapper that's compliant with Spain. So that you get in, we call it in the industry gross roll-up. So there's no taxation take. It's a deferral system. So there are advantages. And there are certainly advantages in terms of, if you've had a property in the UK for many, many years, under the overseas testing, then from 2015, you're not liable for capital gains tax on property from prior to 2015 in the UK. So look, there are advantages in Spain. It's just, again, bespoke, autonomous, regionally specific.
Great. Thank you. So what about day-to-day management of investments? Anything to add to that, Nicole, in terms of how the Spain differs from the UK?
Sure. I think the investment options here, it's so narrow compared to the UK or Australia, for example, where there's almost like this menu of options to choose from when you're looking to invest into the stock market. What makes tax sense in Spain is very, very narrow. but the tax benefits are fantastic. So it's something that we're talking about, this tax wrapper. It's something called a Spanish compliant bond. So there are some really good options there to consider. And essentially it helps reduce income tax, capital gains tax. It can reduce wealth tax, and even succession tax as well. So all of the taxes.
Thank you. Nicole, what about if a client relocates back to the UK or even to a different country? How does that work?
Sure. I guess in a way it's the reverse order of when someone's moving here. It's a similar strategy whereby we would firstly understand what they're looking to do, what their objectives are, if they have timings in place. And if they're moving to a country, for example, that we also operate in, I'll work as a team with a colleague who's based in that country, and we'll create a full strategy from a cross-border perspective. So that makes sure they exit Spain in the best way possible from a tax and residency and timings perspective. And that then makes sure that they arrive in that country in the best way possible for the same reason. So just as they did when they moved into Spain, it works in a similar fashion when they go back, or if it's to the UK. So we will review what they have, what to restructure, if anything, and we'll point them in the right direction to make sure they've got seamless advice the whole way through. Steve, I don't know if you've got anything to add on that point.
Yeah, it is important. And things, for example, that the tax years don't run simultaneously. You know, UK, for example, is April. Spain is January through to December. And a lot of countries are like that. So it's important that, again, the timing is right, like we alluded to right at the top of the call, that, you know, sometimes you've got to get your timing right. So you can have tax implications on the other side. So, yeah, I mean, planning is important.
That's definitely the right thing. We're going to actually hear from another client just before we close up. Trevor, hello.
Hello, Liz. Hi.
Where in Spain are you?
I'm in Fuengirola, which is sort of between Malaga and Marbella, along the Costa del
Very
Sol.
nice.
Very nice indeed.
When did you arrive there?
I actually moved out here last December, so just under a year I've been here.
Okay, great. How did you know that you could trust the advice that Chase Buchanan gave you when you were doing your financial planning?
Well, I knew that choosing a financial advisor was going to be a major part of the move, so I set aside quite a bit of time to do it. There wasn't much advice from sort of friends because obviously it's not something that many people do. Used online information, but that in itself only goes so far. So I then had a beauty contest between sort of a short list of 4 people that I'd chosen. And I interviewed them, 2 face-to-face and 2 on the phone. Following that, there was follow-up second interviews with 2 of them, and from which I chose Steve and Chase. So
I like your vigor.
Yeah, well, it's a very important step for me, you know. So yeah.
And have you felt supported since you made that choice?
Oh yeah, very much so. Very much so. I mean, I know that Steve, if there are problems, and there have been problems come up, and I know that Steve will be on the case for me, and I don't need to chase him. So I just leave it to him and wait for him to give me an update. So yeah, I felt supported very, very well.
Brilliant. And if someone else is thinking of moving to Spain, what advice would you give them about, working with Chase Buchanan?
Working with Chase. I don't know if it's specifically about Chase, to be honest. I think the personal relationship is important. So make sure that your contact is somebody that you're happy with, which in my case, you know, I certainly was. And yeah, make sure you're happy with your contact and how frequently you're going to be talking to each other and what the communication will be like.
Brilliant. So looking forward, you've already mentioned that your relationship with Chase is that you pick up the phone or drop them an email and they respond.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Steve, at the moment we're still at the phase we're in at the moment. we're still communicating almost daily, actually, with sort of various things going on. But yes, that will be the way that it will continue. We either message or we speak, say, on a daily basis. Going forward, I'm sure that will probably drop off a bit, and we'll drop down to sort of monthly or rather annual reviews. But Steve and I think, have become friends, and I'm sure that we'll meet up for drinks and meals occasionally anyway.
Yeah, you need to enjoy that new life in Spain rather than doing all your finances the whole time.
Exactly.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
Brilliant. Well, you've obviously got two very happy clients. Thank you, Nicole and Steve, for kind of touching on a lot of things. There's so much to cover. We've sort of hopefully touched on as many things as we can, from selling property, visas, pensions, investments. You're obviously very qualified, and you understand the journey of people moving to Spain with all the things to consider. If anyone's been listening and wants to hear more or understand a bit better any of the things you've talked about, what is the next step for contacting Chase Buchanan? Nicole?
Sure. So reach out, contact Chase Buchanan, and we will have a complimentary financial review with you, just to really understand what it is that you're looking to do. So it will be completely bespoke and specific for your personal situation, but we're really happy to have that time with you just to understand more about it and take it further from there.
Thank you. And Steve, I'm offering you the last word.
Yeah, I would add to that. Look, for me, for us as a company, it's really important that we help people. If it looks like there is nothing, by all means, reach out via the website, contact us on the telephone numbers that are on the website, and by all means, reach out. If we can't help, then we will probably know somebody who can. We're not a sales organization. We're an advice company, and it's important that we help people, and it's going to be beneficial. Otherwise, we engage somebody else. Simple as that. Honest.
Brilliant. Thank you both so much again. Hope that's been helpful. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thanks, Liz.
Bye-bye.